Hey, what's up guys? This is Jordan Lambrecht from Pixel Bakery Design Studio here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Here I would do a quick demo on how we usually set up templates like this. This client has a website that is pretty heavy in imagery, and with that comes a lot of confusion on how to properly size things and how to expedite workflows. This is our pipeline for that. We use Photoshop and we use a little trick called generate assets. So step one, make sure you always have a clean workflow and a nice naming convention structure. I went ahead and I've got two demo files that we're going to use. I've got a list of resolutions and sizes from our web developer that the client wants, and I went ahead and started a new folder called Web Assets Tutorial. So let's just open that up even before we get into Photoshop, and let's make a couple things here. Let's make a file called source. And you know what? That's it for now. We're just going to make a file called source. We're going to go ahead and drop in all of our images. In this case, there's only two. I've got this image of me looking kind of grumpy. And then I've got a little render I did for a different client. I just realized how small this is, so that might not work well. Oh, 1070 by 1100. That should be fine. If not, we'll figure it out. So I'm going to throw those two in, and just for posterity, how big is this thing? Nope, that's really tiny. Well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I think you guys will get the concept pretty quickly anyways. We just went ahead and we put that into a folder called source, and then we're just going to boot up ye old Photoshop, and let's just go ahead and make a new document. You can click on web, whatever, but the important thing is that we have this little artboards thing over here checked. And then this is where naming conventions come into play. I'm gonna name it PB, Pixel Bakery, because we're treating this as an internal client, and we always start off with initials. We'll call it Web Assets, and then we also always want to version everything we do, so this is just V1. And if we look at our notes, our first resolution, is going to be 16 by 9, 1920 by 1080. So we'll just go ahead and start with that one. That's pretty easy one right off the bat. You want to leave your resolution at 72. That's totally fine. You do want to make sure you're in RGB color mode, though. You don't want CMYK. And then 16-bit. I like working in it. A lot of the times it'll get flattened, but it's good to see some color options. And then we'll just hit create. And we're presented with an artboard. So this is similar to Illustrator. This artboard feature came out, I think, like a year and a half, 2 years ago. And not a lot of people know about its functionality. It's really handy. I find myself, well, before it came out, I'd never used Photoshop, and now that this functionality exists, I find myself using it more and more. We are presented with an artboard. Artboard 1. We're just going to rename that though. We're going to call it 16 by 9 ratio, and then we'll just make sure to plug in our dimensions as well so we can keep track of it, stay organized. So that's our first artboard, and then we've got a 4x3 one as well. Let's just duplicate that, and over here on the right we should be able to just type in 1024 by 768, 1024 768, and boom. And we'll just go ahead and copy that 4x3 data, paste it there, name the artboard. We'll kind of just rinse and repeat until we get all of our artboards set up. Next is going to be a 3x4, 768 by 1024. So that's a portrait one. Then we have a 1x1. That's good for like Instagram. And copy that. Name the artboard. resize it to 1080 by 1080. You'll also notice that these aren't massively sized images, right? Like, 1080 by 1080 isn't huge. And that's okay. You have to remember that we're working with the web. So we want smaller file sizes. Generally, when you're uploading images for a website, you want to keep it at maximum 400 kilobytes. You don't want to go beyond that. And we'll talk a little bit more about compression and stuff like that and how to optimize it towards the end. But okay, anyways, one more 3x2. Let's take this artboard. And if you don't see the tabs, you can always just click on the name. And then there's also an Artboard tool, which you can hit or toggle by hitting V, and that'll rotate between the move tool and Shift V to switch it back over to Artboard. You can just make a new one. But I like these handy buttons. So the last one's going to be a 3x2, and that's going to be 1080 by 720. And we might not always use all of these, but since we're handing this off to a client and we're not doing any website maintenance or anything like that, we just want to make sure that we're future-proofing this site as much as possible so it doesn't end up broken in a few months. And this is kind of what we're looking like here. If you don't really understand what the number like 3x2 means, that's a ratio. So every unit, or 16, so this has 16 units wide and then 9 units high. So it's a ratio, where opposed to a square, that's going to be equal. So it's going to be 1 unit to 1 unit, fractions. Okay, so those are in there. Next step, we're going to go ahead and save this file. And we're going to just drop that into, God, that's so tiny, our web assets tutorial that we've been working out of. And hit save, make sure it's a PSD. And that's done. Next, we're going to go up to File, Generate Image Assets. And that should just toggle on. And what this will do is when we put in the correct data, it'll automatically make our images for us based off of what we give it for information. So let's go ahead and next step, let's get one of those images in there. So there's 2 options we can do. There's place embedded and place linked. I would recommend straying away from place embedded. Otherwise, you're going to end up with 50 gigabyte Photoshop files, and that's not fun for anybody. And since our naming structures and folder hierarchies are really clean and simple, we're not really going to lose any of the original images. So we can package it all together and just place linked, and that'll save us a little bit of space. And then I'm going to go into source, and let's just start with this Cinema 4D render. And here we go. It's in. Easy peasy. We're going to resize it. I've been getting tripped up because I'm so used to holding shift to resize uniformly. And let's just start off with that 16 by 9. And we can get it close. It's okay if you go over your size because it'll crop it based off of the artboard. That looks pretty good. Then let's open up our 16 by 9 file, or folder down here. We can delete that extra layer, we don't need it. And then we can just drag this over to a new artboard. And don't like the size of that, so I just hit Command T. And that's probably the best that we're gonna get. We can kind of reposition it though, so we have some cooler stuff going on in the image. Like right there is pretty good. And then just rinse and repeat. Oh, Maddie's gone. Command T. Resize it so it fits. And let's do, that's pretty good. And then I'm option directing, excuse me. Command T. Resize it down. T. And I think Yeah, that's good. Sweet. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different versions that our client can use wherever he wants on the website. Next step. So that's great. They're on the artboards, but now how do we make them images? So over here, we've got a bunch of weird stuff. We've got the name of the original file, then a copy of it, right? You'll probably want to do a little bit of SEO work in the title. You know, if this is for book festival, so that's good. I've got the client name in there to stay organized, but then I don't really need this other stuff. No text. I did a version that had some text and a call to action on it, but this doesn't have it. And I don't think I ended up sending that one to the client. So let's just delete that extra stuff. And let's put in some other information. Let's just say, let's do 16x9. I think that's a good naming convention. And then we do still want to always version everything, v1. And then here's where it gets a little weird. We're gonna go ahead, oh, I just noticed that's gonna be 3x2, excuse me. And this is where it gets weird. We're actually gonna name the file now. So we're gonna say .jpeg, and then we're gonna also do 100%, if I remember correctly. And now we type that in, and since we already toggled generate image assets, if we go back to our source folder, we have a new folder that automatically generated called assets, and it automatically places UNP Book Festival 3x2.jpg in there, which is amazing. We can take it a step further even though. We can say, go back into this, and we can say slash 3x2 slash. Now, if we go back, we can just get a save, Command S. Let's go back to our folder. Let's see what that did. Nope, nothing. There we go. So it doesn't need the trailing slash in the front. Now it makes another folder called 3x2, and it places this in here. So we're getting this like really clean interface. And once you have a ton of files, that's gonna come in handy, right? So let's just do that for the other ones. We'll say 1x1.jpg 100%. At the front of it, we'll say 1x1 slash. Same thing over here, 3x4 slash 3x4.jpg 100%, and that 100% means it's 100% quality. Again, we're not to the point where we're optimizing or compressing anything. We want to retain that kind of master copy of it. Again, 4x3 slash 4x3.jpg 100%. And last but not least, 16x9 slash 16x9.jpg 100%. Boom. And again, we'll just save because we hit a milestone. And look at that. We've got all of our different folders with all of our different resolutions. And boom. Now, the downside to having source files is we can't delete these. These need to stay in this folder, and that's a 50 megabyte image, right? But look at that difference. We put a TIFF in, which was 50 megabytes, and already using just 100% quality on our JPEGs, we're down to 410 kilobytes, 287 kilobytes, and 297 kilobytes, and so on and so forth. But that is basis of how to do this. There's a couple other steps that we can take to make sure that our website stays fast and speedy. I don't think I really need to do this. That might be a good example of just kind of a weirder use case. So let's pop that in and let's do that 1-to-1. Scale it up a little. And you don't want to scale up too much, otherwise you're just naturally gonna lose quality. Like see here, we have this kind of pixelation that's already happening. And that's because my source image was smaller than the artboard. We're trying to make something out of nothing. But so let's do this one too. Just 1x1/. Stick to the other naming convention. We'll say book festival. And this is where we can, since we have multiple photos happening, we probably want to get more specific. And we'll say like Jordan headshot _1x1.jpg 100%. And that'll place it. And now that we have multiple photos happening, we probably want to be more specific with the other ones. So instead of having to go in and rename all of these generated images, all we have to do is update them inside of Photoshop. So we can say promo render, and that will automatically rename the generated asset. Pretty sweet, right? I'm a huge fan of this. And the nice thing is this is really easy for most people to grasp. So you can hand off this Photoshop file and a zipped kind of folder with this structure and skeleton set up to your clients to get a longer shelf life out of your web projects. So sweet, that's awesome, but what's next? We're just gonna do some light compression. And I really like tinyjpeg.com. Actually paid for it, which is weird. I don't normally subscribe to weird one-off kind of software things like this, but plus it's gonna keep me in it. So what we can do is we know that these are all uncompressed, so we can just take all of them, drag and drop them. There's also a Photoshop plugin for tinyjpeg. I haven't messed with it. I did get their WordPress API though, and that's pretty sweet. It just automatically does all of this compression stuff and resizing once you upload an image to your WordPress site, but you might not be using WordPress. So, and it's pretty fast too. I think there's a max 5 megabyte file, but we probably shouldn't be starting off with 5 megabyte files to begin with. So that would be something in our workflow that would need to be addressed. But that's done, sweet. Look at that difference, 79%. We went from 308 kilobytes to 65, which is a huge drop, 82% savings, 2 megabytes. And that's a massive impact on your SEO. Your site will load faster. So we're just gonna hit download all. And there's a couple different ways that you can lay this out. Max, hey, stop. Hey, stop it. Nope. Yeah. There's a couple different ways you can lay this system out. Max, are you done? Hey, can you stop? I'm doing a thing. Chill. There's a couple different ways that we can lay the system out. So they all have the same naming conventions, right? But they're a different size. So we could close Photoshop and replace these images. But that doesn't, once we reopen Photoshop, it'll regenerate those assets and overwrite what we just did. So that's not really a viable solution. What I like to do is I like to make a new folder called *compressed. And I like to put that in each different ratio folder. And that asterisk will make sure that it's always at the top of the Finder if you sort by name, because once you get a ton of images, it can get a little bit more complicated. So within there, that's where I'll throw the compressed version. So 16 by 9 goes there. 3 by 2 goes into that. 3 by 4 here. 4 by 3. 1 by 1, 1 by 1. And boom, we're done. And this is what our structure looks like now. Nice, clean, simple, fast, small, and organized. And that is about it. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out. Yeah, thank you for watching, and see you next time.